Welcome to Customer Success Foresight, where we interview top global thought leaders and ask them about the future of customer success. On episode 1, we are excited to welcome Damien Howley, the author of Control Your Customer and the Chief Customer Officer at Nimbello.
Damien, what's up? Great to see you again. Thanks for hopping on and talking about the future of CS and what you see in the future. So before we kick off, we'd love to get a quick intro from you for folks who are listening in, and we'll go from there.
All right. Thanks for having me, Sagar. It's great to be chatting with you again. My name is Damien Howley. I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Nimbello. I'm the recent author of a book called Control Your Customer. And I've been in and around software for my whole career and running and building customer success teams for the last 12 years. So this is customer success is a topic I'm very passionate about. And yeah, I think keep it super high level. That's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Well, we've had a lot of great conversations. I'm really excited to pick your brain on a couple of areas and see where this goes, because there's a lot happening in the world of CS and a lot to unpack. One thing in particular that we talked about last week, I'm super curious about, is you were mentioning this trend, and I don't know exactly where you saw it, but CCOs, Chief Customer Officers, are becoming CEOs. And that made me pause because I love the intention there, but I'm curious why and how. So would love for you to unpack that a little bit. Where did you hear about that and what's driving that?
Yeah, let's give credit where credit is due. It's not something I am personally observing, but it is something I think Rod Cherkas referred to in his book, The Chief Customer Officer. I think, if my recollection serves me well, which it doesn't always. But long story short, there was this part where he's highlighting like the path to CEO has got some traditional roots, right? People coming from sales, people coming from product. There's a product-led growth. Product-led leaders. There's sales-led leaders. You might have an engineering-led leader, and so on. And recently, there's started to see this uplift in customer-led leaders. So these are people who with origins in customer success, customer experience, account management, and so on and so forth. And there were certainly some thoughts around why that might be. And then, what you and I talked about, right? I just offered my own thoughts is that those individuals who are very tight with customers are also subsequently very tight with like internal operations and with product and with support and with finance and legal, and right, like as a customer success manager or somebody who's in and around customer success, you're inherently kind of at the center of a lot of internal operations. And so for myself, I've seen the people I've been working with in customer success for the last decade have accelerated quickly into leadership roles and VP of CS and a lot more chief customer officers. We're seeing people with customer backgrounds being in and around the board, and so there's a lot of energy around this vertical, and I think it's been very positive, and there's been a lot of people who have really massively contributed to its expansion. At the same time, I think it's starting to bear fruit with kind of niche roles and start of specialization and leadership, and then subsequently opportunities for customer-led CEOs. So, it's going to be really interesting to look over the next few years as we see kind of the next wave of leaders step up and really what that brings to bear for a company. And I would certainly speculate that, if you've got somebody who is highly in tune with the customer base, understands operationally how to deliver value and how to maximize that value delivery, and understands the value proposition and the market positioning and such, that's not a bad set of skills to have to lead an organization. So I know that's a lot of words to say that this seems to be a positive trajectory for the customer success space.
I I totally resonate with that. And I think another observation I've seen is in the past 10 years, look at cloud penetration and how many software solutions have propped up in every industry to support end users. There's a ton of options out there. And so I feel like the customers are really empowered right now. They have a lot more selection power. They have a lot more buying power. They have a lot more information. Oftentimes they're coming to you not to figure out what you do, but to validate their decision. I believe those are your words from last week, right? They're using the conversation to validate that you're the right vendor for them. And so to have an organization that is putting the value on the customer and putting them at the center of the universe, truly, I think speaks to what you're talking about. So it's really interesting. And I'm curious how this is going to evolve. One more point on that. You had mentioned last week in a conversation with, I think, a previous potential vendor you were talking to, but less about the vendor, more about the process. You said there's a CSM who was actually the AE as you're buying the solution. And that blew your mind, right? I think that's a really interesting thing a lot of organizations don't think about. So can you spend a minute on that? Why was that so interesting to you as a buyer of software?
Yeah, and look, so you touched on a few things, right? Like about the educated buyers and that and I'm not so much in the world of sales, but like, my team's always received the deals. So we're kind of acutely aware of what their buying experience was, right? Like very acutely aware. And so what I suspect is happening is, and it's not new, it's been happening for a while, right? Like the motions of selling are much more tied into value and credibility and accountability than they are tied into like salesmanship, right? Like the buyers they have a plethora of options. They've got just a ridiculous amount of reviews and kind of input, and they're able to approach a vendor at the time that after they've kind of done their multiple degrees of vetting the space, and so I think that changes the mindset of buying. I buy a lot of software. It ranges from maybe $5,000 a year to $100,000 per year, right? Like I'm not buying ERPs or CRMs, but I'm buying all the point solutions and all kind of the things that plug in. And I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, credibility. I'm looking for risk averseness. I'm looking for somebody who is going to comprehend my business problems. And then to the story you were telling, right? I bought software last year. I think it was around $50,000 a year. It was a CSP, and the AE was also the post-sale account manager.
That's amazing.
And they made a big stink about it, right? Like they had a slide on it, and they basically confronted this, this worry that all buyers have. It's like,
elephant in the room.
Are you selling me a crock of shit? Like in their slide was, he said specifically, he's like, look, I have to deal with you post-sale too. So that's how you know that I'm not lying to you right now. And by the way, let's just get to that. I don't think salespeople are liars. I don't think that's not the angle I'm going at. But it was weird that they chose to staff their or kind of complement their customer experience with a pre and post sale resource that rode that journey. And I'll tell you, that was comforting for me, and that was something that made me just buy more into the value that they were delivering. It was a moment, right?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because I feel organizations are siloed today. Sales, marketing, product, CS, account management have their own ideas of customer needs, but when these roles pop up that are crossing the chasm of these of the different functions and aligning them, I think speaks to the putting the customer at the center of the universe, because the customer doesn't care about sales versus product versus marketing. They just have one experience with your company. And I think there's an opportunity in the world of CS to, what you're saying is, what is CS? Customer success. But I feel like to this point, customer success has been defined by the company, the vendor, not necessarily the customer, or there's an opportunity to do that. but we need to listen to the customer, have them self-report what does success look like for them, understand their needs, and leverage that to drive the path forward, right? That
I mean, so I've had no shortage of, LinkedIn posts and webinars about this particular piece, right? Like understanding your customer. In fact, in my book, I've got a whole chapter about customer objectives and how to almost, not call it scientifically, but the best practice is to really extract a meaningful objective from your customer. And that applies to sales too, right? Like, I say, look, your customer didn't wake up one morning saying they want to buy some software. They woke up one morning saying, I've got a problem in my business, I need to solve it. And then maybe a few months later, they ended up signing your contract. If you can't tap into that, if you can't measure that and you can't talk about it and deliver, you're just pushing software. You're just pushing features. And it's so overlooked on the CS side. It's certainly overlooked at certain different ACVs. It varies. Like, I get it. It's less consultative if you're buying something that's $300 MRR, and it's way more consultative if you're buying something that's $100,000 ARR. But the most successful CSMs and the most successful AEs that I've seen, they understand their customers' objectives. They understand their business objectives, their department objectives, and they're able to credibly prove that their software is helping drive their customers towards their own objectives. They're not sitting there talking about features and functionality. They're talking about results.
Totally. And that feels like what customer-led growth is actually about across the board. It's if every go-to-market function can listen, act, and serve what you just said, then I feel there'll be a lot of issues that are solved. It's hard to do, right? It's easier to talk than to walk on that.
I did a mini customer tour last Thursday and Friday, and I met with a handful of customers. I do these things super fast. Wednesday night, I put the kids to bed, and then I went to the airport at like 9 p.m., fly out, hit the customers, right? But it is like, it's like a really hardcore interview. I might ask each customer, 80 to 100 questions in an hour and a half session. Wow. They're talking the whole time. I'm understanding their operation, where they see up. Like, it's not just about me trying to sell something. I understand where their opportunities are, where their pain points are, and I found it harder to get CSMs to have like that type of a session versus getting a CSM who can teach the product. So it's a fundamentally different set of skills, but I come back from those sessions and I just have ultimate clarity around this customer's business. And it builds trust and credibility too.
And I think I want to take what you said and take our conversation in a slightly different direction. When CSMs do that and can do that at scale, do that across the organization, I feel that really elevates the role of the CSM. You're no longer focused on adoption only, because that's product focus. You're not just focused on revenue, which is upsell, again, product focus. You're focused on strategy, being a strategic CSM, right? And I know you have a lot of thoughts on this, and maybe you want to put a plug in for what you're working on, but that's what it feels like it's all headed to, is elevating this role to the next stage. And I'll give a quick, thought here. Gainsight is created this industry. They created the role of the CSM, right? And what customer success is. And I think as we progress, there has been a need to elevate, get them to be more respected in organizations. And you told me a great anecdote last week about a CSM who maybe didn't feel like they had leverage in their organization. I would love for you to share that. But anyway, it feels like we're at a crossroads right now where there is a change in the market that is requiring these folks and these teams to elevate. Well, we need to define what that next level looks like. It's not just enough to exist, but we need to turn that into something that both the customer and leadership in the organization can really respect?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it's an interesting point in time, and I can get into more of that in a second. But like, I've been pushing this kind of elevate agenda for like a decade, and it really is due to like in the early days of CS, I ran a team that we had maybe 350 logos, and we understood that we needed to elevate our experience and elevate our engagement so that we could secure our revenue. And these were 100 to 150K ARR deals, and so that's kind of what I've been pushing for a long time. But during the last 10 to 12 years, you've seen the rapid emergence of like PLG and like down market, kind of much easier on the buying side. You can have people buy software very quickly and test it out, and so what I suspect is happening is this kind of divergence in the CSM role, or kind of specialization. That's what I alluded to earlier, right? Like I think that there is, or at least in the world that I'm in now and have been, the need to elevate CSMs and drive the strategic CSM is even more it's ever present, right? Like I need a CS team that can secure tactical and strategic leaders, can drive value, can prove that we're delivering to objectives, can expand and cross-sell and upsell. But in the down market, like product-led growth, I don't think that is as applicable. That the role of CSM needs to be more scalable. The ACVs don't support having a 50 logo portfolio. In the down market, you might need to at bare minimum have 150 to 250 logo portfolio. And so these are going to have implications on how you service your different customers. Like I'll tell you, the smallest portfolio I had, one of my CSEs, he had 12 logos at like 6 million ARR. And then the largest, when I was at another company, we had a CSM had 250 logos at like 1 million ARR. And so those require fundamentally different tooling. They require fundamentally different skill sets. They even, if you've got 250 logos, you're just not going to know them. So you need to hit them at scale, right? As you move up market, and you reduce your portfolio size, it's depth, it's understanding, it's it's definitely multi. What do you call it? It's many contact. What multi-threaded? I don't know why I'm blanking on that. I had multi-tenant at the end of my it's multi-threaded engagement. With 3, 4, 5, 10 stakeholders. It's a much deeper rooted, elevated engagement. And so that's what I think is happening, is that we're starting to see a bit of a split, and there's, the strategic CSM is coming out and moving up market. And then there's the scaled CSM that has a equal value, but a different purpose. And if you're spending time on LinkedIn, right, you're seeing a lot of, or like what I see is a lot of CS at scale, and then people talking about, upmarket CS. And that's the specialization that I believe is we're witnessing kind of real time in the last year.
That is a fascinating point. I don't feel that we've really thought about post-sales, and that I think scaled CS has become a thing, and people know what that is as a category. As a quick plug, Damien is writing a book called The Strategic CSM. And I just want to say that when it comes out,
I wasn't going to plug it.
Hey, that's my job. That's my job. But anyway, I bring it up because I don't think anybody's called it that yet. People have called scaled CS. We know what that is: high touch, tech touch, right? Automations, journeys, low ACV. But when you think about the white glove approach, what do you call that? I feel like that's been left to, who knows what's been left to. But I love that, and maybe just call it the strategic CSM since you're writing this book. But yeah, I think that segment is a fundamentally different approach and requires a different motion, different expertise level, different engagement model. And we can't look at it as one monolith, right? CS is not one monolith. We approach sales differently. We have different segments for enterprise, SMB, mid-market. CS has that, but the world is changing and it requires different tooling. So I think one thought, maybe we can do different podcasts on this altogether, different talk, but at what ACV range do you sort of break away from scaled CS to strategic CS, right? That's a question I always grapple with. I'm curious from other leaders where they draw that line. And is it something else besides ACV? Is it how many strategic, tactical, and operational contexts you have? Again, another topic from Damien, control your customer. But what drives the delineation between the two, right? I don't know. And maybe that's the conversation.
Yeah, we can definitely pencil it in for another session. I'm totally good with that. Like, I will say I've historically aimed at larger ACV customers. I've aimed to cap somebody's portfolio at 40 customers. And it wasn't predicated on too much science, if I'm being totally honest. It was more, there are 40 hours in a work week. If you've got 40 customers, you can spend 1 hour per customer. Now, I know that doesn't actually pan out, but it was a concept that I wanted the CSMs to kind of hold on to, is like, okay, I've got this smaller portfolio. I'm not going to wait, a quarter to hit them. Like I got time every single week to engage every single customer. So really amping up the proactivity, the engagement, the multi-threaded engagement, and so on and so forth. I'm sure we could sit down and put some numbers in place, but it is a balance between ACV and logos. And in a number of CSMs, you might have 1,000 logos at your company and 3 CSMs, right? Like, you got to think about the practical application of those CSMs to your customer base, and where you've got to scale and where you've got to go deeper. And my last company I was at, we segmented the customer base and we put the lower part of the customer base on more of a scaled CS, proactive, like messaging and chat and so on. And then the top end of the customer base was much smaller portfolios where we had proactive multi-threaded engagement. And so it's not black and white, right? Like, you don't have to go in and I just think many more customers or many more people will be thinking about CS in those terms. I need to scale the bottom part of my customer base as I really white glove the top of it. And those are different tool sets. They're different skill sets. They're different CSMs. They're different experiences. Yes. And that's where, just to kind of round out on a point you made, on the heels of publishing Control Your Customer, right? Like, and that book, people talk to me in that book. They send me messages and emails like a lot, and it's great. And I always engage in but most often people are asking me for like more and deeper, like they want me to just like go deeper on this idea of the strategic CSM. Like, well, how do I do this? And how do I approach this topic? And how do I have this conversation with a strategic contact? And how do I earn my way in? So that's the next book is, the deeper evolution of some of this material.
I love it.
But so we'll leave it at that for now.
We'll leave it at that. Awesome, Damien. Thank you so much for joining today's conversation. This is super illuminating, and I hope a lot of folks get some great insights from it. Check out Damien's book, Control Your Customer. There's a lot more insights there. And until next time, it's great speaking with you.
Thank you, Sagar. I appreciate it.